Hare Krishna.
Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopidana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Mahatma Samparibrajacharya Stakare Srismad Saraswati Goswami Bhagavati Jaya Nanda Kori Vaishnava Ki Jaya Ramacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jaya Nain Sutta Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivacharya Gaur Bhakti Jaya Sri Radha Krishna Bho Gopinath Sam Khand Radha Khand Giri Ki Jaya Vrindavan Dham Ki Jaya Navadvip Dham Ki Jaya Ganga Maya Ki Jaya Jamuna Maya Ki Jaya Guru Dwarka Dham Ki Jaya Swami the Bhaktivinoda Ki Jaya All glories to the All glories to the Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Gurudev, and all glories to the Samud Vaishnava devotees, and all glories to you, His Grace BRAHMA-TIRTHA Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, you are muted.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for being here today, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
It's a pleasure to be here. This is one of my favorite groups to meet with. I ask everyone who can to put on your cameras so I can see you and you can see me. I realize some of you, that is not possible to put on your camera, but if you can, I'm speaking to it, even if for a moment. I see Rupa Vilas and Raja Taruni. And who else do I see? Okay. And
this devotee is called Kavikanapur Prabhu.
okay, well, I'm glad you're all here.
Yes.
So welcome to the class.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, Prabhuji. This is the last day of the week, but it's the beginning of a new chapter of the Bhagavatam, and you happen to begin the new chapter with us, which is so blissful. So
Okay.
we're very happy to have you begin the chapter with us today.
I will begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And you can hear me okay, I'm assuming?
Yes, Prabhuji, yes.
Okay, very good. This book, this chapter first came out in the early 70s, if I remember. Prabhupada brought with him books from India, I think the first and second canto, but this was originally reprinted as a booklet, and they reprinted different chapters from the second canto as books. And I read In the Process of Creation was a previous chapter, in The Cause of All Causes. So this came out as a standalone book. That's important because the chapter itself is able to stand alone. Now, the subject matter begins in the next, in the very next chapter. It continues with the Purusha Sukta. So, but the chapter itself says something very important. And we're going to discuss verse 1, but I'm going to point out some themes in the whole chapter. So, Nardo Vacha Deva Deva Namastu Se Bhuta Bhavana Purvaja Tadvigyanti Yaj Yanam Atma Tattva Narad Sanam. Sri Narada Muni is asking Brahma, O chief amongst the demigods, O firstborn living entity, I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Please tell me that transcendental knowledge which specifically directs one to the truth of the individual soul and the super soul. And called Atma Tattva, the transcendental knowledge. So, now, first question you may ask is, Narada Muni is a transcendental spaceman. He knows everything. Why is he asking these questions? Well, it's the same reason Arjuna asked the questions, for our benefit. So Yoga Maya can take a great personality like Narada Muni or Arjuna and bewilder them so that they can act on our behalf. And by acting on our behalf, ask the same questions that you and I might have. And I personally have this question. If I met Brahma, and think for yourself, if you ever met Lord Brahma, what would you ask him? I mean, what kind of questions you would ask Lord Brahma? Well, the first one that comes to my mind is, what's it like having four heads? But there are much better questions than that to ask. But I must admit that that one does come to my mind because I can never quite understand how that works. And other Brahmas have many, many more heads, as shown in that Chaitanya Charitamrita story, where our Lord Brahma went to see Lord Vishnu, and the doorman asked, well, who are you? I'm Lord Brahma. And the doorman comes back and says, which Lord Brahma? And Lord Brahma is thinking, I'm Lord Brahma. What do you mean, which Lord Brahma? Brahma is Brahma. And so he's ushered in to see Narayan, and he asked, somebody asked, what canto and chapter? Second canto, chapter 5, text 1. So he asked, Lord Brahma says, excuse me, Narayan, but why you ask which Brahma? So at that moment, Lord Narayan, Lord Vishnu goes and sends a command out by just telepathically, is what I understand. And all of a sudden, all the Brahmas from many, many universes appear. Now, they couldn't see each other, but our Brahma could see them all. And they all offered obeisances at once. And the noise was so tumultuous, you can hardly imagine. Why? Well, first, our Lord Brahma only had 4 heads. These others had hundreds, maybe millions of heads. And their helmets crashed down at the same time. And the Brahmas say to Narayan, what are you here for? He said, just checking in. How's everything going? They all say we're having a nice day, to put it in the vernacular. And they go home, and our Lord Brahma became very humble. Now, how does somebody have 4 heads and many heads? Well, this comes down, this is not such a strange concept, by the way. There's something in quantum physics called string theory, which is being propagated very strongly by Brian Greene, who's a very famous physicist who happens to be Yogeshwar's brother, our God brother's brother. Now, is string theory true or false? I can't say. Nor can any physicist say, because it's an unverifiable theory. Theories that you cannot falsify are considered hypothesis, not really a theory, because any scientific theory has to be able to be falsified. If it can't be falsified, then it's just speculative. So it's an unproven theory, but it's needed. Why is string theory needed? Because in order to solve, without going into a lot of detail, in order to solve certain quantum physical problems, you need to have more dimensions than we have. We have 3 dimensions plus time, so let's say 4-dimensional world. But in order to solve these problems, you need 10 or 20 dimensions. This is argued by the physicists. Let's settle for 10. That's enough. Now, which of you can imagine 10 dimensions? You can't draw that. You can't even imagine your head, but mathematically it's required. So the idea that there are more dimensions is something that's very much accepted in modern science, so they don't understand it. Curiously, the Bhagavatam also, the only way we can imagine 4-headed, 100-headed Brahmas is to have more dimensions than we are used to measuring. We have length, width, depth, time, but they have to have more dimensions. So the idea of more dimensions is quite modern science and quite Bhagavatam science. Now, precisely what it means, that's a difficult matter. We need some more Sadaputas to figure it out, but the concept is there. So we have our Lord Brahma. He's 4-headed. I don't know at this point in time if he's seen that all the other Brahmas or not. I don't know the time sequence, but Narada Muni is going to Brahma and saying, please tell me that transcendental knowledge which directs me to the truth of the soul and the super soul. So the first thing he's saying is, I want some transcendental knowledge. And the entire Bhagavatam is for transcendental knowledge. Devotees often get bewildered by the 5th canto, which as the head of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, I have to deal with all the time. The 5th canto is the speed bump, as I think I described previously, on the way to the 10th canto, forcing us to slow down and think. But this 5th canto is not oppositional to modern astronomy. In fact, the 5th canto the statement is given that no one can quite understand how Bhumandala works. And it can be understood from many points of view. That's in the fifth canto. So one point of view is modern science, one point of view is pranic astronomy, plus some of the things in the fifth canto are actually metaphorical. It says it right there, like Priyavarta taking his chariot and dividing up the mandalas. That is considered a metaphorical statement, not an actual statement. There are many metaphorical statements. For example, the whole Puranjana story, which Narada Muni tells to King Prachetabarishat in the fourth canto, Narada Muni states clearly it's a metaphorical story. City of nine gates. There is no city that has nine gates. He's telling a story to make a point to the king. So part of understanding the Bhagavatam is to understand the context in which statements occur. Now we'll go look at this purport. The perfection of the parampara system, or the path of disciplic succession, is further confirmed. In the previous chapter, it's been established that Brahmaji, the firstborn living entity, received knowledge directly from the Supreme Lord. And the same knowledge was imparted to Narada Muni, the next disciple. Now, Narada Muni being the child of Brahma. Let me ask you a question. What was the first word that Brahma heard? Can somebody unmute and tell me the first word he heard, or stick it in the chat?
Tapa.
Tapa. And what does tapa mean?
Austerity.
Meditation. Austerity. Meditation.
Yes. Now I have a son. He's now quite older. But when he was in the Gurukula, working under Burijan Prabhu at Gitanagari. Is anybody from Gitanagari on here now? Yes. So you know that Gurukula was there in the 80s. And Burijan was the headmaster. And my son was a student there. So my son was given a nickname by Burijan. And the nickname was Tapas. Why? Because my son hated austerity. And there was a certain austerity there. So he would always figure out how to avoid austerities. So he got the nickname Tapas. If he didn't like the prasadam, they had a yogi bar factory. It was very successful. Eventually it failed for certain reasons, but very successful, very delicious yogi bars. So he would figure out how to beg or steal the yogi bars so he could eat what he wanted to eat. So that's tapas. But he was the opposite. He was a tapas, but they nicknamed him Tapas in a sarcastic way. Very appropriate name. Still, he was 50, almost 50, and it still applies. So, Narada asked to receive the knowledge, and Brahmaji imparted it upon being asked. Therefore, asking for transcendental knowledge from the right person and receiving it properly is the regulation of the disciplic succession. The process is recommended in Gita 4.2. Can somebody quote me Gita 4.2? Anybody, any pundits here want to quote that from me? Or click on it. It is approach of spiritual man. The supreme science is received through the discipline succession, but in the course of time, it's lost. So the inquisitive student must approach a qualified spiritual master to receive transcendental knowledge, but surrender submissive inquiries and service. We're going to get back to that in a moment. Knowledge, tell me what verse in the Gita says that we should surrender submissive service, submissive inquiries and service. Can somebody help me? Which verse in the Gita does that refer to?
434.
Say again?
434.
That is correct. Let us turn and just approach a spiritual master, inquire submissively, render service. He can give you knowledge because he has seen the truth. Tattva Darshana. The inquisitive student must approach to receive knowledge. Knowledge received by submissive inquirer's service is more effective than knowledge received in exchange for money. A spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from Brahma and Narada has no demand for dollars and cents. A bona fide student has to satisfy him by sincere service to obtain knowledge of the relation and nature of the individual soul and the super soul. Now, what's going on here, we see in our own world. Now, Prabhupada gave a very clever example. At one time, the richest man in India was Birla. I don't know now, I don't think anymore, but he was the richest man in India. So Prabhupada said, if you want something from Birla, you can't bribe him. He has all the money he needs, plus billions of times more. How can you win Mr. Birla over? He says, you can do it for 2 cents. Does anybody remember how Prabhupada said, you can win Mr. Birla for 2 cents? Does anybody know that?
I don't know, but I can attempt to make a suggestion. That is, if you give the richest man's son 2 cents,
you give him a 2-cent candy. Exactly right.
Yeah.
You win a samosa. Somebody please fax a samosa. Somebody must fax it. So what happened is, Prabhupada says, but if you see a son and you give him a little candy, then Birla's heart will melt, because you've rendered some important service to him, took care of his son. So Prabhupada used that as an example, a metaphor. So if you want to learn, if I wanted to, I'll tell you a story. I think you'll like this story. All of you know Radhanath Swami. And Radhanath Swami recently met Joe Biden. He was invited to the White House for the state dinner with Prime Minister of India, Modi. So Radhanath Swami was invited to the White House. So there he is, dressed in a sannyas garb, but it was considered a black tie event. So he put a black chadar around his neck. That was his black tie. So he was following the rules. And he went to the White House. We just spent a day together a few weeks ago, and he told me the story. So I'm hearing it directly from him. And when he gets to the White House, there's a big reception. I don't know, 100-200 people at the state dinner. It's the most formal thing the American government does for visiting heads of state when they do a state dinner. Very, very formal. And before the dinner, there's a mingling time. So he's just standing there. He doesn't know anybody who's there particularly. And one lady walks up to him. She's a lady in her young 40s. She sees him in the dhoti. She says, I want to tell you what I'm doing. And she's doing some projects that we would consider sattvic projects. And then Radhanath Swami tells her about the Echo Village. And she says, wow, I want to see the Echo Village. And then she says to Radhanath Swami, you know, my father's going to India and he wants me to go with him. Maybe I can get away for a little bit and see the Echo Village. And Radhanath Swami says, that'd be very wonderful. By the way, who is your father? And she looked at him very incredulously. And she realized Radhanath Swami was not, as we would say in the vernacular, sucking up to him. Of course, who is your father? She said, Joe Biden. It was President Biden's daughter, Ashley Biden. And then later on, after the dinner, is receiving line, and all the guests get to meet the president. And so they shake hands just for a moment. And when it came time for the president to greet Radhanath Swami, he did just shake hands. He put his arms wide open, says, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so happy you're here. Because the daughter had said something to Joe Biden. Said, what a nice sadhu we have here. What a wonderful man. And because the daughter had said that, and he had pleased Joe Biden's child, then Joe Biden was just opening up and so happy to see Radhanath Swami. So this is the principle. This is how it works. If we want to get to an important person, be it the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of India, or the Lord Brahma, or even more important, the Supreme Lord, we don't do it by controlling them. We do it by serving them. And how do we serve them? We serve the servant of the servant. It worked with Radha Swami in the White House. It works with Narada, and this is what the advice being given herein. Narada Muni is approaching with an attitude of surrender, submissive inquiries, and service. That's how it works. If you want spiritual advancement, you do it. If you want to learn from somebody greater than you, you serve. If you want to learn from somebody lesser than you, then there are other ways to do it. If somebody's lesser than me, let's say I want to learn about matter. Now, matter is lesser than me. I have here a microphone, and I want to learn about the microphone. I don't serve it. I take it apart. You know, me, I'm a tinkerer. I fix things. I love taking things apart. Oh, I don't always put it back together the right way. But I love taking things apart. Since I was a little boy, I've taken things apart. I still, to this day, build my own computers. I like tinkering. It's like a hobby. I mean, I have a knack for it. So I want to make a new microphone. I'll take this one apart and take all the pieces and look what's there and see how it works and maybe substitute a better piece for something. You know, I can do those things. This is lesser than me. I can put my hands on it and grip it because it's lesser than me. But if I want to learn something from Vijay Krishna, I see him there, and I want to learn something from Vijay Krishna, I can't take him apart like the microphone. Of course, I can put him in a torture chamber until he tells me, but he may or may not tell me. Would you tell me? I don't know. But if I serve him and serve his child, he's going to melt in my hands. This is the process of devotional service. This is what's being described. I've told this story before, but maybe there's new folks. I'll tell it again. I was a high school teacher in India, in the most backward state in India, Bihar. And in Bihar, I was in the most backward district of Bihar, and Singhbhum district, which is extremely backward place. And it was so remote and so hard to get to that the Peace Corps, I was working in the American Peace Corps as a teacher, they would never visit me. They left me alone, which, believe me, I had no trouble with whatsoever. I like that. And somehow this place, though, was the closest assignment to Calcutta. So I would have to take 2 trains to get to Calcutta. An old choo-choo train, the old steam locomotive out of my town, to the major town nearby, then an overnight electric train to Calcutta. And while I was in Calcutta, I ran into some devotees. And they said, we're doing food relief for Bangladesh refugees in Mayapur. I said to them, what's a Mayapur? Well, we're celebrating Gaur Purnima. It's Lord Chaitanya's birthday. Who's Lord Chaitanya and what's a Purnima? I knew very little. I knew the Maha Mantra. I'd learned that before I went to India, and I read the Gita several times. Prabhupada's wasn't out yet. But I was in India to try to learn something more, but I didn't know anything about Mayapur or really ISKCON or anything really. So I went up there. There was a war with India and Pakistan, so it was a major food relief program in Mayapur. And there was no buildings. There was a straw hut for Prabhupada that Chutananda had built. It's still there as a memorial, Bhajan Kutir, it's referred to. And a men's tent and a women's tent, a pandal tent. And the only thing you could possibly buy in the whole area of Mayapur was this Bengali villager would bicycle by with some coconuts, and you could buy a coconut. Nothing else was there. You couldn't buy a tube of toothpaste if you wanted. It was nothing. No shops, no wall with shops, nothing. So I went there to serve out prasadam. So one, what was of the three things I mentioned, what was I doing? I mentioned three things you need to get transcendental knowledge. Which one was I doing at that point? Can somebody tell me? There were three. Does anybody can tell me what of the three I was doing?
Were you inquiring?
Say again?
Inquiring.
Nope, not yet. I was serving prasadam. I just gave a big hint. I'll tell you, I was serving.
You were offering service.
Exactly, precisely. Another pakora for that gentleman.
I love pakoras.
Well, you're in time. Somebody please fax him one immediately. Or at least fax him a picture of a pakora. That will do, because that's all we can do in this virtual world. So I was rendering service. Then my friend Tejos said, would you like to meet Prabhupada? He had also been a Peace Corps worker in India before he joined. I said, yes, that'd be very nice. So then they took me in to see Prabhupada. And I said, and I thought in my mind, I remember very clearly, well, he has so many qualifications. I may have read something about Prabhupada. Maybe he really is a bona fide guru. I didn't use the word bona fide, but in my mind, I said legitimate guru. And I said, well, if he really is, I'm not going to challenge him. I'm just going to ask the questions that are really on my mind. And then later on, I can process the data and understand it, but I'm not going to challenge him. So what was the second thing I did that I was supposed to do? It's right in the text.
Now comes the inquiring part.
Yeah, submissive inquiry, exactly. So I inquired submissively. So it says in the Gita, approach a guru, inquire submissively, render service. I accidentally did all three. And what do I get? I get transcendental knowledge. So then Prabhupada spoke to me. Now there was another problem in Mayapur. There was 60, 70 devotees, all younger than probably all of you. Probably the average age was 22, which means maybe there was a senior wise man at 25 and some kids at 17 or 18. And everyone was very enthusiastic to preach. And there was one person to preach to, one guest at the whole festival, me. So Prabhupada kept me in his hut for 3 days to protect me. And I got a chance to ask him so many questions. Of course, that came, you all know that book came out, Perfect Questions. It just came out last month in its 61st language of Mandarin Chinese, which whole thing bewilders me, but these things do happen. So accidentally, I inquired submissively, rendered service. So if we do that, knowledge received by submissive inquirer's service is more effective than knowledge exchanged and received for money. So you go to school, to college, and you pay some tuition and you get knowledge, how to build a computer, how to build a microphone. You get all kinds of knowledge. But if you go, but you won't get transcendental knowledge. You'll get knowledge. I mean, I want knowledgeable people. When I'm not very good auto mechanic, when my car breaks down, I want a good auto mechanic. I don't even care what his religion is. I just want to know how to fix car and not cheat me. So similarly, we can obtain knowledge by trading for money, but that doesn't work for transcendental knowledge. You must render service. So we find in India, they sometimes sadhus travel around and for money, they'll read BHAGAVATAM for 7 days. And Prabhupada has condemned that because you will not get transcendental knowledge. Now, it's not that Prabhupada refused to get money. One guru approached Prabhupada and said, when people offer me money, I say, I don't touch money, it's material. Prabhupada says, when people offer me money, I go, gimme, gimme, gimme. I want it. Because he'll use it in Krishna's service. But that is different than paying him for transcendental knowledge. And I have no record of Prabhupada getting ever paid to give knowledge. That was always freely distributed. Now, Prabhupada does say when we distribute books, we should get a donation, because why? Why when we distribute books should we get a donation? Can someone tell me?
To be able to reprint.
I'll say again, a little louder.
To be able to reprint the books.
That is true, but there was another reason Prabhupada gave.
To engage the buyer in devotional service.
Yes, because if they don't give money, they'll think the book is not very valuable. When you see something lying on the street, you don't think it's very valuable. So by giving some money, they think it's valuable and they'll take it more seriously. So you get 2 pakoras today. So that's the reason why. I'm going to just move ahead a little bit.
And before you continue, you get your book.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, perfect questions, perfect answer is being distributed here in the Portuguese Yatra.
Where are you located?
Azores Archipelago, the 9 Portuguese islands.
Yeah, it must be beautiful there.
Yes, it's like paradise.
I've heard that.
And your book is being distributed here.
It's all bewildering to me, but somehow, Prabhupada can make the lame walk and the blind see. What can I say? He can make me appear intelligent. That's just an odd phenomenon. I really, honestly, in 50 years, I haven't quite understood how this happened, but I have to accept it did. My dear Father, please describe factually the symptoms of this world. What is its background? These are good questions. How is it created? How is it conserved? And most important questions, and under whose control is all this done? Because we know you're Brahma, but you're not there's somebody behind you. Then the next verse is very, very important. My dear Father, and there's 2 Sanskrit words, Vijnana Avishtam, and that means scientific knowledge. Vijnana, you all know, means realize scientific knowledge. My dear Father, all this is known to you scientifically, because whoever was created in the past, what would be created in the future, and whatever is being created at present, as well as everything within the universe is within your grip, just like a walnut. Notes. You can hold so easily in your hand a walnut. My dear Father, what is the source of your knowledge? You know everything, but how did you get it? Under whose protection are you standing, and under whom are you working? What is your real position? Do you alone create entities with material elements by your energy? And as the spider easily creates a network of its cobwebs and manifests its power of creation without being defeated by others, so you also, by employment of your self-sufficient energy, create without anyone's help. Where'd you get this from? How do you know this? So this is the origin question. We have many let's look at modern science. We have a theory invented by a priest, actually, called the Big Bang. I was not here billions of years ago, so I can't be a personal witness to how true or false it is. But the Big Bang story is very similar to the story of creation, which is given in this canto of the Bhagavatam, in that when Lord Vishnu breathes, universe are created, these bubbles, and they keep expanding. And modern science has a lot of definitive evidence that the universe began as a small singularity. You could, like a walnut, you can fit it in your hand, just like practically even smaller, like a dot. Then it expanded. And so this is very similar to the creation story in the Bhagavatam. And as I talked earlier, quantum physics says there must be a lot of other universes. And the Bhagavatam confirms something like that. Now, are the science and the Bhagavatam talking about the same thing? That remains to be studied. I'm head of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. We have many astrophysicists and philosophers following up on Sadaputta's work to get into this deeper. So then we have the issue of if there's millions of universes, and we have this one universe, and it starts off, let's look at our one universe, and it starts off as a point, and then it expands. Now, when it does it, there are certain numbers, constants, and these constants, like the Planck's constant, the Planck length, they're called, named after the famous physicist Max Planck. These are numbers that are precise to 10 or 20 decimal places out. And according to the modern calculations, if these numbers were off by 1 digit in the 20th decimal place, life could not happen, the universe couldn't happen. The laws of physics wouldn't work. So before there was a Big Bang, there were laws of physics, there were numbers. So that means prior to the so-called Big Bang, just assume it happened for a moment, there had to be some intelligence. So if there's some intelligence, whose intelligence is it? This is the same kind of inquiry that Brahma is doing. Whose intelligence is there before you, Brahma? And to be Bhaktivedanta Institute, we ask, whose intelligence is there to set up these initial conditions so things can happen? So I'm trying to relate what goes on in here does have an analog with our modern science. So I'm going to pause here and stop here to see if you have any questions on these topics. Well, first I'll recap what we've studied. First thing is Narada Muni is curious. I want to offer my respectful obeisances unto you, Brahma. Tell me the transcendental knowledge which directs me to the truth of the individual soul and the super soul. So he's starting there. He's not even going to the Supreme Lord. That comes later. Let's start off small. Describe the symptoms of this world. How is it created? Who's under whose control is it? All this is known to you, Vijnana, scientifically, because whatever was created, you created. But who created you? And this is the inquiry that's going on. It is the Bhagavatam begins Atato Brahma Jijnasi, and the begins, now is a time to inquire. When Sukadev Goswami is talking, he's saying, now is the time to inquire about how we got here, what's going on. This is the time. So this, again, Narada Muni is asking Brahma. Brahma is saying the same thing. Now is the time to inquire. Intelligent people ask deep questions. Where do we come from? How did we get here? I'll tell you a funny story.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Prabhuji, for such probing thought. And devotees, if anyone may have questions, comments, realizations, you may indicate by using the hand emoji of physical hand.
Yes, I'll give you a funny story first. There was this little boy, Tommy, and he's like 10 years old. And he goes up to his father and says, where do I come from? So his father, with a lump in his throat, tells him the story about the birds and the bees and sexuality, and explains all these things to his son. And in somewhat an embarrassing way, but he has to do it. Then later he turns to his son and said, why did you ask where we come from? Well, my friend Joe is from Pittsburgh. I wanted to know where I come from. In other words, his father answered the wrong question. These are the right questions. These are not the wrong questions, because these questions are asking very specifically, where do we come from, but focused. on the spiritual intelligence behind it all. Okay, with that, are there any questions, comments? You can raise your hand. I'll open my chat window. Oh, some pakoras were sent. Thank you for doing that. I feel good about that. Yes, Vijay Krishna, you can unmute and ask your question. We're all a little envious of you that you're in the Azores and we're here in Florida in this huge heat wave, but go on.
Yes, Brahma-TIRTHA Das Prabhu, thank you very much. You're most kind. Dandavat Pranams. Prabhu, my question is related to the last part of the book, your book, Perfect Question, Perfect Answers. And I was just searching for the last question you asked to Srila Prabhupada related to this book. And you say that it was not a question, but and because I want to ask a very specific question based on what you said to Srila Prabhupada at the very end of the book. You say that your name is at that time was Bob, and Bob says, quote, they claim that the Bible says Jesus ate meat, unquote. So my question is based on this quote, and it goes as follows. It is a very direct question. Did Jesus eat meat or not?
I'll give you a very definitive answer. I don't know. But I'll help you with this. I have the book in front of me and I have the question. I do remember it. Prabhupada did not answer that question directly because Prabhupada was not a Christian historian who would know if Jesus ate meat or not. He said, if Jesus ate meat, you couldn't imitate him. Even if he ate meat, that doesn't mean you can imitate him. So, Prabhupada says, you say that Jesus ate meat, admitting that you do not know under what condition he ate meat. Is he himself eating meat? Is he advising others not to kill? You think Jesus Christ was contradicting himself? So, Prabhupada says, so he has eaten meat? As a question. He knows, but he has asked me not to kill. I have to follow. That is a real system. So I'll tell you a story that will make this clearer. Once, a wonderful devotee, Harikesh, who lives near me, a very good friend, former GBC of Russia and Soviet Union, in the early 70s, in Calcutta, a older white lady showed up at the Calcutta temple and was dancing at Artik. And everybody ignored her. Some lady come. Prabhupada thought that's strange. Why would an older white lady be dancing at Artik? She clearly wasn't Indian. She was way too light-skinned to be Indian, at least that part of India. And she looked Western. She dressed Western, everything else, and she was dancing at Artik. So Prabhupada, we were all, devotees were kind of spaced out, but Prabhupada immediately spotted this was an anomaly. This was odd. So he said, find out who she is. So devotees met her, talked to her. She was the Polish consulate general's wife. Now, at that time, Poland was part of the Soviet bloc behind the Iron Curtain. And there was no way, this was the midst of the Cold War. The Cold War was very deep then. I remember it very well. And there was no question of American devotees ever getting visas to go behind the Iron Curtain. It's just impossible. So Prabhupada realized this was an opportunity. So he said, see if she can get visas for our people to go to Poland. And she went to her husband and he issued the visas. So Harikesh and two other devotees took off to Poland behind the Iron Curtain. Almost impossible to have happened. And they spent a whole winter in Poland. And it was very austere. They had very little money. Preaching was very hard. But Prabhupada used to say, going to certain places, just being there is preaching. Like he told Dayananda, when Dayananda went to Saudi Arabia, got a job with IBM, went to Saudi Arabia. And he said, how will I preach in a Muslim country? They check my luggage, and if there's even a Gita in the luggage, they take it out and step on it and throw it out. How will I preach? And Prabhupada said, just being there is preaching. Just being there will make a difference, which it did. So Harikesh went there, did some preaching. Things worked out okay, met some people, but there was very little to eat in the winter. Unless you had money, a lot of money, which he didn't. The only thing to eat in the winter was meat. So when he came back after months in Poland with the other devotees and saw Prabhupada and gave him a Sankirtan report, Prabhupada was very pleased to see him, but very disturbed how thin he looked. He looked so thin. All the devotees, they looked so thin. Prabhupada said, what happened to you? Why are you so thin? Harikesh goes, there's nothing to eat there but meat. Then Prabhupada said the most amazing words to him. Then eat meat if there's nothing else. Now, I've talked to Harikesh about this a lot. And it's his opinion that Prabhupada never intended him to eat meat. That was never the intent. But Prabhupada, Harikesh, after Prabhupada told him to eat meat, Harikesh said, what about my consciousness? And Prabhupada said, damn your consciousness, preach. Meaning the most important thing is preaching. If there's nothing else to eat, then do what you have to. But Harikesh said Prabhupada never intended him to eat meat, just wanted to make that point. So if Jesus Christ ate meat or not ate meat, we don't know, we're not historians. And Prabhupada's point is, even if he did, he's the Acharya, and we can't imitate. We have to follow in the footsteps. And he said, do not kill, so don't kill. But I had the same problem you had, Vijay Krishna, because I respect Jesus Christ. I mean, I wasn't brought up Christian, but I saw him, just as a great personality. And later on, Prabhupada revealed Shaktavesh Avatar, but I saw that, and I wonder, how could he eat meat if he's a great personality? But great. Sometimes that happens. So none of the regulative principles are engraved in stone. One time, Prabhupada was on an airplane with Jayatirtha. He was flying first class. So in first class, they serve out a drink before you go. So they served out 2 drinks, and Jayatirtha wouldn't drink his drink until Prabhupada had his, because he wanted Prabhupada to honor it first. So Prabhupada took a sip, and it was very nice. Then Jayatirtha takes a sip and goes, Prabhupada, this is champagne, not ginger ale. Prabhupada just laughed. He didn't drink anymore, but he thought it was very funny. It is funny. So Prabhupada was not hung up. We all try to must follow the principles because that keeps us pure. And we're not Prabhupada that we can be loose on these things on one hand. On the other hand, we can't be hung up either. A few times, Prabhupada told devotees the recipe for making wine out of grapes. And at the end, he said, but don't do it. Why was he saying it? Because sometimes it's very good for people with digestive troubles. But he understood if the devotees did it, they would do it to an excess. I'll give you an example. One time, the late Gaur Hari was walking into the Brooklyn Temple on Henry Street. And he was carrying with him a paper bag that had cans of 7-Up in it. And he's not sure if the devotees would approve of him going to a store and buying 7-Up, but he wanted some. And he was walking by Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada saw him and called him in. And he said, what's in that bag? And Gauri goes, Gauri told me the story. He goes, nothing, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, I want to know what's in the bag. So very embarrassingly, he took out the can of 7-Up and handed it to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada read the ingredients: lemon, lime, sugar, citric acid. Prabhupada said, very nice, I'll have one. But it was good for digestion. Then Prabhupada was in LA, And when he was in LA, the devotees heard Prabhupada like 7-Up. And all over the temple, there were cans of 7-Up sitting on the steps, sitting here, sitting there. And then Prabhupada said, no more of this. This is nonsense. So Prabhupada would sometimes be very strict because we would carry things to ridiculous extremes. At the same time, Prabhupada was very practical. So did Jesus eat meat or not? I don't know. Prabhupada doesn't know. But it's not very important from Prabhupada's point of view. He said, thou shalt not kill. If there's nothing to eat but meat, sometimes that's what people must do. None of us are ever in that position, fortunately. And if I was in that position where there's nothing to eat but meat, I would have trouble eating it because I've been vegetarian for half a century. It would be difficult for me. I don't think I could. But at the same time, that's not the point. So, but I like your question, Vijay Krishnan. You're the first one.
Thank you, BRAHMA-TIRTHA Das Prabhu, as to be expected. Very helpful, if I may say it, outstanding answer to my question. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
And again, thank you. You're the first one to ever ask me that question from the book. Now I'm ready for the next one to ask. So we only have a few minutes left. Is there any more questions, comments, recaps? Even criticisms, they're all equally welcome.
Well, probably I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask because it probably may entail much longer discussion. But
Well, I'll give the short answer.
You just said
in another class, I can give the long answer because I have another meeting coming up in 5 minutes. But ask me the question.
The question is that some devotees are with the opinion or the understanding that in this particular universe, which we live in with Lord Brahma with 4 heads, it is only on this earth planet that the living entity creates karma, that any other part within this universe, no soul creates any karma for himself, but souls found wherever else in the universe outside of this earth is based on the activities that the soul has performed on this earth, which may send that particular soul to whichever planet it may be. But being on that planet, outside of this earth planet, whatever the soul does not accrue any karmic reaction. And it's quite a bitter pill for me to swallow because it does not seem to make sense to me.
Oh, that's a real easy question for me to answer.
Right.
Super easy. Yeah. By the way, in the background, I'm in the world headquarters of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. I just turned off my background. This is one of our guest rooms. That's a very, let me shut the light down. This is a very easy question to answer.
Okay.
It's so easy. I can answer you in a few words. Are you ready?
Yes, Prabhuji.
I don't know.
I am ready.
Yeah, but I don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, okay.
It's nothing I've studied. I told you, see, I said it would be a short answer. I haven't studied that issue. My own intuition is that's not correct.
Okay.
Because whatever we do, as you shall sow, you shall reap. We all have free will. So is it saying that people in lower planets, higher planets don't have free will? We saw Indra became a pig.
Yeah.
And so we see that there's cause and effect all over the universe. So to say that cause and effect only exists on Earth and no other place would seem very odd and wrong to me. And the devotees who contend that, I'd like them to show me what proof they have that that's true. Without way overwhelming definitive proof, I'd say that's a false statement, but I don't want to say certainly because I don't know what proof they're giving, but that doesn't make sense to me. But we live on Earth. We don't live on a higher or lower planet. And what counts for us is what happens on Earth. And on Earth, I can tell you, we sure have karma.
Yeah.
And that's really what counts. And
Thank
the
you.
devotees were saying that to me, it's speculative, but maybe it's not. Maybe they have firm evidences. I've never seen anything like that. See, I
Well,
gave you a short answer.
Okay, thank you. So we go to Shuma Vara Prabhu, please, you are mute.
Varaha Acharya.
Yes,
Hare
Prabhuji,
Krishna.
my humble obeisances. Thank you very much for your enlightening discussion. Just quick one. You just mentioned free will right now. And the issue of free will has been another issue here on this forum. So I'd just like to know from you, Prabhu, if free will really exists in Vaikuntha, do we come down from Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, because of misuse of free will? Or maybe
Well,
what do you
that is of course, a controversial topic. I'll tell you what Prabhupada said on that. He said, some things are beyond our understanding, and that is one of them. He said very clearly, that is an issue that best we not get into because it is beyond what we're understanding. Prabhupada named his magazine Back to Godhead. You don't go, if I said I'm going back to Africa, that meant I've been in Africa before. I would never say I'm going back to Africa if I've never been there before. I'd say I'm going to Africa. So Prabhupada named it Back to Godhead, which means we had to have been there before. Otherwise, why would he name it that? So Prabhupada in his naming said, we have. Now, there are two contradictory statements. One saying you never fall from the spiritual world, and the other saying that we came from the spiritual world. Both statements are found in Shastra. This is called a paradox. When you have a paradox of contradictory statements, it takes deep understanding to get to the bottom of it. Prabhupada, though, advised us that's not an issue that he wanted us to pursue. Some devotees have pursued it for, I think, political reasons. Some people in the Gaudiya Math criticize Prabhupada for saying we came from the spiritual world.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. And Prabhupada told us to avoid those politics. But he did name his magazine, so it's convincing to me. But if you're saying it seems like it's paradoxical, it certainly is. And there are a book written, the GBC commissioned a team of expert scholars to write a book on this, which called Our Original Position. And that book is, I think, available still, Our Original Position. And if you read that book, it goes into great detail in what I'm saying. So you can look at that book and probably get a better answer than I'm giving you. But I'm glad to ask that. Govinda Das, you have a question for me.
Yes, Prabhu, thank you very much. And my respectful obeisances to you and your service to Srila Prabhupada and Vaishnavas. Yes, I have two questions, but I'm afraid you say you have only 5 minutes and 5 minutes is already gone.
Well, I can stretch out a couple of minutes. People get mad at me, but everyone's mad at me anyway, so that's fine.
Prabhu, we are never mad at you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make it very brief. The first question is, it is said that what we see here in the material world is a perverted reflection of the original in the spiritual world. So I was questioning myself. See, there are
just one moment. This is my noon thing. Let me tell them I'll be another minute.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, so the what we see here in the material world is a perverted reflection of the original in the spiritual world. And we see that here we have different type of human beings. And every race has a different face and color. Do we have such colors in the spiritual world? Or the people there only have one color?
Well, first time I've heard that question. Let me think for a moment. Well, we know that Krishna is blue and Balaram's white, so there are many colors in the spiritual world. I can answer it based on that. And Rama is green, and Hanuman is brown, and there are Lord Chaitanya is golden. So the spiritual world has unlimited variety. So there must be unlimited variety, but there's a difference. Right now on this call, we have some people who are brown, and some people are white, and some people are tan, but these are all external because none of us are this body. In the spiritual world, you are that body. There's no difference because there are no material bodies. So, but here we have different color bodies and we discriminate against each other. Happens all the time. I mean, those who are black in America know what discrimination looks like. It's terrible. Even in Gainesville, where I lived, up until 1960, they wouldn't let blacks go to the University of Florida. It was horrible, just horrible. Just right where I lived, I took my children when they were young on a tour, and I took them to the downstairs drugstore. Now things had changed by then, but I showed them the two water fountains. I said, why are there two water fountains? And my son goes, people are thirsty. I said, no, one was for white and one was for colored people. That's how they had signs, but the signs are long gone. So there's a lot of discrimination in this world based on the body. Prabhupada called it the worst disease, skin disease. One time, BHAGAVATAM Swami, who some of you must know him, I adored and loved him, and we were very good friends. And BHAGAVATAM Swami went to Prabhupada because at Princeton University, he was head of the Black Student Alliance. So he was an activist for Black causes. So he went to Prabhupada, said, Prabhupada, there is racial discrimination in your movement. Some people are prejudiced. Prabhupada said, yes, that is your Maya to be affected by it because you're not this body. And it's their Maya to have that prejudice. So there's Maya on both sides. So BHAGAVATAM Swami personally told me that story. So the idea of that we judge people by their body, oh, you're a woman, you're not very smart, and you're black, you're not this, and you're tan, you're not that, and you're white, you're not this, is called skin disease. And Prabhupada said that's our worst disease to identify with the body. And Krishna, in chapter 2 of the Gita, he spends most of the chapter trying to convince Arjuna he's not this body. But I'm sad to say, in our Krishna conscious movement, some people have not read chapter 2 well enough, the very beginning, that you're not this body. And we are not this body. And any kind of discrimination, the people who discriminate are just killers of the soul because they're missing the whole point. And it's going to happen. It's the nature of this world. But in the spiritual world, yes, to answer your question, I'm thinking about it. There are many varieties and there is zero discrimination. Everyone loves everyone. And that's how it should be. It's a sad world we live in. I want to say that just to begin with, because there's so many discrepancies. And that's why in our own movement, we have to be very loving to each other, because the only way our movement can survive is if we work together in a loving way. And if people discriminate against each other in our movement, then all hope is lost. And some people will do that. So we have to just be above it. We can't get involved in that kind of thing. It's so horrible. Even Bhakti-tirtha Swami when he was in Africa, because he was from America, even though he was dark-skinned. He became a tribal chief in Nigeria, which is unheard of for an African American, unheard of. So they made him a tribal chief. And he's on the way to the ceremony to be installed. And there's two cars traveling. And then a truck in the other lane veered and crashed right into his car on purpose, because some people wouldn't accept that even an African American can be a tribal chief. And so Bhakti-tirtha Swami was hurt and bloodied, and the other car behind him was not damaged, and said, "Oh, Bhakti-tirtha Swami, jump in the car, we'll take you to a hospital." He says, "No, even if I'm bloodied, I'm going to the ceremony." And he showed up at the ceremony and he made a chief. And I asked Bhakti-tirtha Swami, "Why did you do that? Why did you go to the hospital?" He says, "Because these people are very prejudiced. But if I showed up and become a chief, they'll think I'm protected by higher authority," which is true. "And they'll leave me alone and never bother me again, the people who tried to kill him." That's true. And that's what happened. So even in Africa, there'll be discriminatory things that, "Oh, he's not African enough, he's American." And so this kind of discrimination is what ruins the world. It's the most ruinous thing to think that I am this body. And that one thing I love about the Hare Krishna movement is I go to festivals and there are Russians and Americans and Ukrainians and blacks and whites and Chinese and Indians and you name it all. And we're all dancing at the same arti with the same ideas, and none of them are that body. That's what makes the movement work. And we have elements in the movement who don't understand that yet, and that's sad. I hope I answered your
beautiful
question.
sandwich.
Excuse me?
I said that's a very beautiful sandwich that we
Yes,
have.
okay. Thank you very much. This is one of my
Thank you so
favorite
much.
places to give classes is for the African Sangha. The Bhakti-tirtha Swami pointed out to me, he said spirituality runs very, very deep in Africa. And whenever I speak in Africa, I can feel that the spirituality runs deep. And though I may be the speaker, based on your questions, I do learn a lot. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I
Thank
wish
you
you
so
all
much.
a blessed
Hare
day.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for because we all saw when you received a call because you're running late in your other
That's okay.
and you still spend some extra more time with us. We can't thank you enough, and we hope to have your association sometime very soon again. Thank you so much. So before Prabhu leaves, may we all unmute and we chant Hare Krishna now mantra to express our appreciation to Prabhuji's presence. Jai.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram.
You have all blessed me. Now my day is good.
Jai.
Your blessings have made my day successful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.